Well, the blue economy, that's another way to describe the produce from the sea. And someone who works in this big blue space is Jodie Kuntzsch, who is the CEO of an outfit called Moananui based in Nelson. She joins us now. Jodie, nice to talk to you. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Dom.
No worries at all. Moananui, what is that exactly? How long has it been around for?
Well, Moananui is a blue economy cluster organization, and that begs often two questions. So what is a blue economy and what is a cluster organization?
Exactly. You're doing my job for me, Jodie. Yeah.
Should we start there? So blue economy for us is marine activities that we're not going to deny this is an economic play. It's important for our businesses to be successful, to be resilient. So there's that economic motivation, but there's more that we can do. So blue economy is the marine activities that are generating economic value, but are also contributing positively to the social, cultural, and ecological health and well-being for Aotearoa. A cluster organization comes off the back of a cluster. Cluster is simply a concentration in a certain geography of synergistic institutions, organizations, and businesses that work together to achieve some kind of economic outcome. So we as a cluster organization bring together all of those little bits and pieces to leverage the value that creates. So there's a profile element, there's a value creation element, and there's a growth element to that. So that's where we come in as that convergence point in the glue that starts to bring those moving parts together.
Yeah, and presumably those people involved, or those companies, businesses, call them what you will, stakeholders, it's mutually advantageous for people to be under this umbrella, if you like, of Moananui.
Absolutely, and by being that kind of conduit through it, it provides that fast track access to, to people, to knowledge, to resources in one place.
What's your background in terms of working with the ocean, for lack of a better phrase, Jodie?
Yeah, so I spent about 20 years in the seafood industry. I immigrated to Nelson to pick apples for 3 months over 20 years ago, and ended up with a job in aquaculture, actually.
Wow.
And spent a lot of that time looking at and really inspired by the value that's created through the non-product attributes. So around the story of traceability and transparency, the social performance, the environmental attributes, as well as now those climate-related initiatives that are being led by and for businesses. So worked here in New Zealand and then along supply chains around the world and with various countries pulling together groups that are looking to build that value and capture that value beyond just the bottom line. So that's been my passion, and certainly driven by the people and the curiosities that they bring to a big blue space that we don't know that much about. So it's very
wow. That's apparently we know less about the ocean than we do about space.
Yes.
Or we've explored more space than we have ocean, something along those lines.
And it is still a challenge, but it's, and one of the reasons that we exist is because the opportunities for us to address some of the biggest challenges for humanity sit out in the ocean. And it is economic, it is cultural, it's ecological, and there's so much more to explore. So there are elements that we've embraced for millennia around trade and around seafood, but now we're starting to look into biotech and blue tech and decarbonization and other ways of how we work on, for, within, and under the water. And that is just beginning to take off.
Oh, it seems such a vast thing to look at. I mean, goodness me, I guess literally and metaphorically as well. Yeah. How do we stack up in New Zealand on all those metrics, I guess, that you have just outlined?
There's some pros and cons to our isolation and to our history. So New Zealand's territory, if you include our exclusive economic zone, or the ocean space that we have the responsibility and kaitiaki for in the world, 96% of New Zealand's territory is at sea. But our ocean-based industries only account for 3% of our GDP.
Okay.
So the opportunities for innovation, for employment, and for sustainable economic development are as vast as you've already identified. And there's also benefits that as we look to grow and rethink how we are doing business with the ocean, we don't have to undo a lot. And what I mean by that is if you look at somewhere like Norway and the work that they've put into developing the salmon industry and the offshore oil and gas industries, there's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of capital investment in that. And to undo that is going to be a big investment as well before the diversification. Now for us, we've got that opportunity to start not from scratch. We come with a lot of IP and a lot of ingenuity, but not a lot of spatial and size development. So that's actually a really good thing. One of the challenges is that, and it's reflected in those statistics as well, is we haven't had a lot of development in New Zealand over the last 20 years. There's been some constraints and inefficiencies that have prevented it, but it has then resulted in a lack of market confidence, a lack of an innovation ecosystem, as well as cash flow. And so when we start to look at that rate of blue economy development in countries like Canada, the US, Iceland, we've got a lot of catch up to do in our regulatory and operational frameworks, in our business models, as well as in our investment in cash and capital flows. The other bit that then is that challenge is we're far away, and connecting with those places is a challenge for individual businesses. That's another place that Moananui steps in. So we look to build organizational links with other countries and other clusters around the world to help fast track our access to the knowledge, to the people, to the resources. So just this morning, I was on a call with a cluster in New England, and they're doing a lot of work around technology and diversification with fisheries and offshore energy. You know, so they've got a lot happening there in North Atlantic that we can learn from here, and the synergies for us to be able to support that development in really sustainable science-driven ways. We don't need to recreate things. We can simply Kiwiize them as we develop them.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, why not draw on the knowledge that's already out there? Speaking of synergies and that sort of thing, there was a trip to Tasmania, I believe, recently with members of Moananui. What was that like? I mean, the Tasmania, presumably there's similarities in terms of the coastal waters. What was that trip in aid of, and what did you learn?
Yeah, so we took 12 of our partner companies over to Tasmania. We had the support of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, as well as a couple partner organizations in Australia. We were hosted by the Blue Economy CRC at the request of their premier in Tasmania, noticing the similarities in our geography, the challenges, and also the types of companies and structures that we have. So one of the drivers for that delegation to go over was recognizing a huge amount of ambition and energy going into innovation development and really looking at offshore or exposed ocean type developments, but a lot of frustration in the partners that they have and the partners that we work with as well. And we thought, actually, a lot of those individuals, or the leaders of those companies, the key researchers, if we put them in a room together, can we create some inspiration, some ideas, some collaboration, some opportunity for us to address those opportunities and challenges? So that was really the starting premise. But we went over there to make those connections with our partners, to their partners, as well as, again, organization, cluster organization to cluster organization. What we really, and we called it an immersion tour. So it wasn't there necessarily to sell stuff or to buy stuff, which sometimes trade delegations are focused on. We went over to explore what was possible when you're sitting in the South Pacific. If there's anybody that we should be able to and need to be working closely together with, it's those across the Tasman. And they've got some great resources that we can tap into as well. So, you know, we'll jump in there. What we walked away with was probably three key things. One was our industries looked at some of their industries and went, wow, you're big. And they went, no, we're not. We looked at, you know, Norway and Scotland and go, wow, we're tiny. And that relativity of size, you got to get out to see it and appreciate where we are. The other was the transparency of companies there. So over the last 10 years or so, the salmon industry in Tasmania in particular has been scrutinized. They've had some great successes and they've had some utter failures. And they were so open and sharing those stories. We went to competitors. We brought competitors together to have dinner with us. And yeah, we recorded things. We interrogated things. They showed us into the back rooms of their operations. And because all of those create opportunities for collaboration and building solutions. And that angle on collaborative development was a huge takeaway for our partners. And then the third, which kind of builds on that as well, is that even with the researchers and regulators, they talked about our industries and our collective responsibility in blue economy development. In New Zealand, we've had a lot of challenge with an us versus them, or a this or that mentality and oceans development. So that was a really important message that we brought back. We were invited to go meet with Minister Shane Jones on the back of that trip, and that was a really key message that we brought back for him.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot of work to clearly do. I mean, if you look at Moananui to date, what would you say would be some of the successes that you guys have had as a collective, if you like?
Yes, so we are a very young organization. It was just a year ago that government announced the first co-funding grant to support our work. And we set up the company in July and opened what we have here, Moananui HQ in Nelson in October. So we're very...
You're in yeah.
We're in our own startup phase, supporting startups.
Well, good point. Startups supporting startups. Yeah.
So in that time, we started with 9 foundation partners, all based here in the Nelson Tasman region. We've now expanded to over 30 commercial partners that cover from Auckland down to Queenstown. We have also built international collaborations and formal agreements overseas, as well as different organizations across the Motu here, and that support that ambition for our partners, which goes back to where we came from, of Te Puna Pono, to be good ancestors. What can we do as leaders and businesses in the blue economy to ensure that we are bringing through those blue economy principles and the reality in the day-to-day of our businesses? So I think that buy-in by the commercial industry is a huge success for us. But the other side is we've held a significant number of events, roundtables, partner forums, bringing together people that would not normally sit around tables together, from actual producers and engineers through to tech companies, ROVs, AI, researchers, and actually bringing that together to the co-development at the very beginning. But the number of events that we've had, we never would have been able to do with our 1.8 FTE that we have on our team. And so it's a reflection of the engagement and the leadership that's coming into the organizations that are part of Moananui. Not just the chief executives. It's not for them to sign the pledge and then go, here, Joe, you go and do my job for me. Is that it's their commitment to bring their people, their resources, and their mahi into this. And really been reflected in the quantity of work that we've been able to do.
Yeah, well, that's a great start, good foundation for the organisation. I've been speaking with people in recent months, I guess maybe the last year or so, trying to put more of an emphasis on aquaculture, considering couple of little islands really in the Pacific, and it's clearly something that we've had a history with. There's plenty more work to do, as you've alluded to, but it seems that the appetite and will for progress and I guess realizing the economic power that could exist within aquaculture is something that a lot of people are, really talking about, excited about. And, I guess this is where an organisation like Moananui comes in, is to try and harness all of that and get it all sort of rowing in the same direction, to use a poor metaphor about water.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that even, within the production system, there are a whole lot of other business ventures that are going to spin out.
Yeah.
And bringing all of that together. And as we look at this export-led growth agenda for New Zealand, part of it is the primary production, but it's also the weightless IP. It's the technology and the engineering solutions. It's what we're going to find in the bioactives and in the biotech archives, I guess.
Yeah.
And turning that into also turning that into products and services. All of that is really dependent on the confidence, on the capability and the reputation of our primary industries, that New Zealand Inc., for all of these other avenues to be successful as well. And so the core of aquaculture and what that means in terms of supporting regional economic growth and supporting that reputation for sustainable food production for New Zealand is really, really important.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot of similarities there with obviously, the land growing.
Absolutely.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Seems to me to be, while the semantics might be different, the overall picture is, I guess, reasonably, similar, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also, we're working with organizations like Lincoln Agritech, and the information transfer, the capability transfer between land and sea. There's so much to offer there, and thinking about how we can do that even better as we look at finding land-based solutions, ocean-based solutions together.
Yeah, wow, gee, there's it's very interesting and quite exciting, I suppose, to be a part of, Jodie. So you've got a good foundation, a good base, and I guess we watch this space, right?
Absolutely. We love our hashtag Go Blue NZ. We are a maritime country, and it's great to be in a position now to be leading that conversation as we go forward, as one that's about a blue economy and what that can do to create value across Aotearoa.
Well, Jodie Kuntzsch, Chief Executive of Moananui, lovely to have you on the program. Really appreciate your time, your insight into the industry as well. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.